Here's a question that sounds like a piece of geography trivia, but is actually a question about the survival of an economy. India has a massive coastline, over 7,500 kilometers. It flanks both sides of the peninsula like a giant V. Yet if you look at a map of our major ports, the west coast is, it's crowded with them, while the east coast has significantly fewer. Why? It isn't random chance. It is a story of geology, colonial history, and even wind patterns. Or take this one. India feeds over 1 billion people. We are an agricultural titan. We are the land of farmers. So why is there a massive gaping hole in our economy where we bleed foreign currency to import edible oil?
It really is the paradox of the Indian economy, isn't it? We can grow rice for the world, but we can't fry it without help from Indonesia, Malaysia, or Ukraine.
Exactly. And today, we aren't just reading a textbook. We are decoding the economic nervous system of the country. We're doing a deep dive into Chapter 11, International Trade from the NCERT Class 12 India, People and Economy book. But, and this is why you're here, we are doing it differently. We are taking that static text and wiring it directly into the high-voltage grid of the UPSC exams. We're tracking the DNA of this chapter through, 10 years of prelims and mains questions.
Yeah, at least. And it's the only way to do it. You can't just memorize the list of exports. You have to understand why the list looks the way it does and, how the UPSC uses that list to test your understanding of strategy, not just memory. We're looking at everything from the 2013 papers right up to projected questions for 2025.
Okay, so we have a massive stack of sources today, the NCERT text, the PYQ documents. But before we start connecting these dots, I need to flag something for you. This deep dive is a comprehensive summary specifically designed for the Simplified UPSC by PPP community. If you are getting value from this analysis, you need to be subscribed to that YouTube channel. That is where the visual magic happens, and it helps the algorithm find other serious learners like you.
And look, deep dives like this, they take resources.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of work. So if you are capable, and only if you are capable, maybe consider supporting the creators on Patreon. That support is the fuel that keeps this engine running.
A huge shout out to the current supporters. You guys are the reason we can go this deep, seriously. Also, standard protocol. Like the video, rate the show, and leave a comment. We actually read them to figure out what to cover next. Now, what's a specific logistical note? You don't need to frantically take notes while you drive or cook. There are free notes with practice PYQs available on the public Telegram channel.
Right. And for the power users, those of you who want the model mains answers for the questions we are about to discuss, you can get premium access. It includes all the videos of this series at once, organized premium notes, detailed breakdowns, and, those crucial model answers. You just need to join the private Telegram library.
Just drop a DM on the public channel to get into the private one. Okay, logistics cleared. Let's look at the mission. We have the theory, we have the test. What is the headline story of Indian trade?
The headline is transition. I mean, that's the one-word summary. We're watching a country try to pivot from a sort of closed agrarian economy to a global manufacturing hub, and we're seeing exactly where it is succeeding and where it is stumbling.
The text opens with a very specific phrase. It describes the history of India's trade as undergoing a sea change. Right. Now, usually textbooks use hyperbole, but in this case, the data seems to support it.
Oh, it's not hyperbole at all. It's a mathematical explosion. The NCERT provides a baseline from 1950-51. Back then, freshly independent India's total external trade was roughly 12,214 crore rupees. That is the combined value of everything we sent out and everything we brought in.
12,214 crore. In the context of a national economy, that is peanuts. Today, you have single infrastructure projects that cost way more than that.
Exactly. Now, jump to the data provided for 2004-05. That number rockets up to 8,037,133 crore.
That is, I'm trying to do the math in my head. That's not an 800% increase. No way, that's way, way more. It's exponential growth.
It is. But we have to be careful here. As a student of the economy, you have to ask, is this real growth or is it just inflation? If a loaf of bread costs 100 times more, the GDP goes up, but nobody's actually richer.
Right. Good point. So did we actually trade more stuff, more physical goods, or did the rupee just get weaker over 50 years?
Well, both happened, of course. But the text clarifies that even if you strip away the price rise, the volume of trade exploded. We are physically moving more goods across our borders.
So what happened? Economies don't just wake up one day and decide to trade hundreds of times more goods. What was the trigger?
The text identifies three main drivers. 1, a new momentum in manufacturing. 2, diversification of our markets.
Meaning we started trading with new countries.
Exactly. Not just the UK and the Commonwealth. And 3, and this is the big one, liberal government policies. You simply cannot decouple this chart from the year 1991.
The LPG reforms. Liberalization, privatization, globalization.
That's the one. Before 1991, India was a fortress. We had incredibly high tariffs, a very strict licensing system. People called it the license Raj. We made it very hard to buy things from us and even harder to sell things to us. The sea change the text refers to is essentially the walls of that fortress coming down.
So we opened the gates, but here is the catch. The walls came down, trade volume went up, but we didn't become a superpower overnight. The text drops a very sobering statistic right after that massive number.
It does. It points out that despite this incredible growth, India's contribution to total world trade is, even in that 2004-05 data, roughly 1%. Just 1%.
That really puts the superpower 2020 memes into perspective. We are a big fish, no doubt, but the pond is an ocean, and we are still just 1% of it. And there is a darker line on the graph in the book, isn't there? The one that's always a bit worrying.
The deficit, yes. If you visualize the chart in the text, you have two lines, one for exports, how we earn, one for imports, what we spend. And that import line is consistently, stubbornly higher than the export line.
Let's ELI 5 this for a second. Explain it like I'm 5. In personal finance terms, this is just spending more than you earn, right? Every month.
Essentially, yes. At a national level, we call this the trade deficit. We're buying more from the world than the world is buying from us. And the text makes it very clear what the main culprit is. It's not that we are buying too many luxury cars or fancy watches. It's one single commodity that distorts the entire graph.
Black gold. Texas tea.
Crude petroleum. The text explicitly links the widening deficit to the sharp rise in petroleum prices over the years. And this is where we have to connect it directly to the exam. This isn't just a fun fact.
Yeah.
This concept of the deficit was the absolute core of a question in the 2020 prelims.
Okay, I have the source here. It's the 20csp1.pdf file. It's question 52.
Right. The question basically asked students to verify a specific characteristic of India's trade. It asked if India suffers from an overall trade and current account deficit, and if our merchandise exports are less than our merchandise imports.
And based on the NCERT text we just analyzed, I mean, that's a direct hit.
It's a slam dunk. The answer is a clear yes. The text provides the historical DNA for that answer. The logic is simple. We import oil. Oil is expensive. Therefore, our import bill exceeds our export receipt. If you understood Chapter 11, you didn't need to read the newspaper for that year. You knew the structural, long-term reality of the Indian economy.
I love when it lines up like that. It feels like you have a cheat code. Okay, so we have a deficit. We get it. But we're still exporting things. When I think of traditional Indian exports, my mind goes to, like, history books. Spices from Kerala, tea from Assam, coffee from Kurkorg. Is that still the main game?
That's the old India trade profile, the postcard version of India. And this is where that sea change concept comes right back in. The text notes a distinct decline in the export share of those traditional items. Coffee, spices, tea, pulses. Their share of the pie is shrinking.
Why, though? I thought the world was obsessed with chai lattes and Indian curry. Did demand drop?
No, demand didn't drop, but supply from other places rose dramatically. The text explicitly cites tough international competition. Vietnam started growing coffee on a massive scale. Kenya and Sri Lanka went hard on tea production. Brazil.
So we lost our monopoly. It wasn't our special thing anymore.
We lost our dominance. We still sell it, of course, but it's not the engine of our export economy anymore.
So what replaced them? If we aren't just the land of spices anymore, what are we? What's on the new postcard?
We are becoming a factory, a workshop. The manufacturing sector took the lead. In the 2003-04 data that's presented in the text, the manufacturing sector accounted for nearly 76% of the total export value.
76%. That is huge. I feel like we don't talk about that enough. We're always talking about IT and services. But here is the NCERT, a government textbook saying manufacturing is 3/4 of our export value.
It is significant. But you have to peel in. You have to ask, what kind of manufacturing?
Yeah, probably not iPhones back in 2004.
No, definitely not. The text highlights two main areas, engineering goods and gems and jewelry.
Engineering goods.
Oh.
That sounds impressive, but it's also very vague. What does that actually mean? Are we talking about nuts and bolts or, like, jet engines?
It's a huge category. It covers everything from car parts and electric motors to industrial machinery and machine tools. And this links beautifully to a mains question from 2022. Question 23 asked about the spatial pattern of the iron and steel industry and resource distribution.
Okay, connect the dots for me. How does iron and steel, which is a domestic industry, relate to our export figures for engineering goods?
You can't have a booming engineering goods export sector if you don't have a strong domestic steel industry. You need the raw material. The fact that India exports engines and machinery is direct proof that the iron and steel industry, which is located near the coal belts of Jharkhand and Odisha for a reason, is feeding a downstream industry that then sells to the world.
So the geography of the mines in Chotanagpur Plateau determines the success of an exporter in, say, Pune or Chennai.
Exactly. It's all one long value chain. But not all manufacturing is a success story. I remember reading something about textiles in the notes that really surprised me.
Right. You're talking about the part where the text says the textile sector could not achieve much. Which is so weird, because the government threw everything at it. Liberal measures, subsidies, you name it.
So the government tried to help, but it just didn't work as planned.
Not as well as they hoped. The text explicitly blames competition from China and other East Asian countries like Vietnam and Bangladesh.
And this is a crucial lesson for anyone writing a mains answer about Make in India. Just because you have liberal policies and you throw money at a sector doesn't mean you automatically win the market. China acts as a ceiling. We just couldn't beat them on price and volume in textiles the same way we managed to carve out a niche in gems and jewelry.
That's a key nuance. Policy isn't a magic wand. Market forces are real. Okay, let's flip the script. That's what we send out. What are we bringing in? We mentioned oil, obviously, but let's go back a bit. In the 1950s and 60s, what was our biggest import headache?
Food. It's hard for us to imagine now, but in the 50s and 60s, India was living ship to mouth. We were importing massive amounts of food grains, especially wheat from the U.S., under the PL 480 program, just to keep the population from starving.
That is wild to think about now. We are a net exporter of rice today. We're feeding other countries.
It's a massive turnaround, but that dependency stopped after the 1970s.
Because of the Green Revolution, right?
Exactly. The Green Revolution, for all its controversies, worked in terms of pure production. We stopped importing food grains. But, and here's where it gets really interesting from a trade perspective, as soon as we stopped importing food, we started importing the things needed to grow the food.
Like what? What do you mean?
Fertilizers
Ah.
and petroleum.
So we traded our dependence on foreign wheat for a new dependence on foreign oil and fertilizer.
In a way, yes. Modern agriculture, the kind the Green Revolution ushered in, is incredibly energy intensive. You need petrochemicals for fertilizers and pesticides. You need diesel for tractors, for harvesters, for irrigation pumps. So the very success of the Green Revolution actually increased our import bill for petroleum products.
The text highlights the 1973 energy crisis. That OPEC embargo pushed petroleum prices up, and suddenly our import bill just skyrocketed.
And petroleum is unique because it's a double import, as I like to call it. We import it to use as fuel for cars and trucks, that's transportation, but we also import it as an industrial raw material for petrochemicals, plastics, and, as we said, fertilizers. So the price of oil goes up, it hits us twice. It hits inflation because transport gets expensive, and it hits manufacturing because raw materials get expensive.
That really explains why it's such a massive, unshakable chunk of the import bill.
And this brings us to another great PYQ connection. Prelims 2020 again. There was a term in one of the options, West Texas Intermediate.
West Texas Intermediate. Sounds like a brand of cowboy boots.
It does, doesn't it? But the question asked what it refers to. And the answer is a grade of crude oil. It's a global benchmark for pricing, along with Brent crude.
And because oil is our biggest import, knowing your crude oil grades is actually relevant to understanding the Indian economy. It's not just trivia.
It's crucial. And if we look forward, the 2025 mains projection includes a question about energy security being the kingpin of India's foreign policy. The NCERT data on petroleum imports is the evidence you need to justify that statement. You can't have a foreign policy that ignores the one thing you spend the most money importing.
Right. If the oil stops, the economy stops. It's that simple.
Exactly. Now, besides oil and fertilizers, there's one other major import that seems to be a national obsession in India. The text lists gold and silver as major imports.
Yes, the gold obsession. The text lists it as a principal commodity, right up there with the essentials.
Why are we importing so much gold? We don't eat it. We don't burn it for fuel. Most of it just sits in lockers.
Well, it's cultural, it's economic, it's the Lakshmi mindset, it's a safe haven asset, it's for weddings. But this obsession was the direct subject of a 2016 mains question.
Oh, really? What did they ask specifically?
The source is 16gs3.pdfes. It literally used the phrase craze for gold in Indians. It said this craze has led to a surge in imports and put pressure on the balance of payments. Then it asked students to examine the gold monetization scheme as a possible solution.
Wow. So the UPSC explicitly acknowledges that our collective love for jewelry is a macroeconomic problem.
Yes, and it is. Think about it. When you buy gold, you are taking rupees, converting them to dollars, buying metal from abroad, and then locking that metal in a safe where it does nothing productive. It doesn't build a factory. It doesn't pave a road. It just sits there. It worsens the trade deficit, just like oil does, but without any of the economic utility of oil.
That is a very harsh way to put it, but it's economically accurate. The NCERT text supports this by showing gold and silver right there at the top of the import list alongside petroleum. It is a significant drain on our forex reserves.
It's just fascinating how culture directly impacts the national balance sheet. Okay, so we know what we are trading. Now let's talk about who we are trading with. The direction of trade.
This has shifted dramatically, too. Historically, for obvious reasons, we look to the West. The UK, due to colonial ties, and then the USA became a major partner. But the text indicates a massive shift towards Asia and Oceania.
Asia and Oceania. So basically our neighbors and the Pacific region.
Yes. By 2004-05, that region accounted for 47.41% of our exports. That is nearly half our exports staying in our broader neighborhood.
But who is the single biggest partner? Is it a neighbor like China or someone in ASEAN?
Not back then. In the 2004-05 data provided in text, the single largest trading partner was still the USA.
Okay, so the USA is number one. Who's next in line?
Followed by the UK, Belgium, Germany, and Japan.
Wait a second. Belgium? That's very specific. How does a tiny European country like Belgium rank higher than industrial powerhouses like Germany or Japan?
Diamonds.
Ah, of course. It links back to the gems and jewelry sector we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Antwerp in Belgium is the global hub for rough diamonds. So the trade works like this. We import rough diamonds from there. We cut and polish them in places like Surat. And then we export the finished gems back to the world, including Belgium. So the trade volume is incredibly high. It's a circular trade.
That makes total sense. Now, you mentioned the big shift to Asia. Does this link to any specific government policy?
It connects directly to India's Look East policy. This was referenced in the 2016 mains, question 18, which asked about the economic and strategic dimensions of that policy.
So the data in the textbook showing nearly 50% of our trade is with Asia is basically the economic proof that the Look East policy isn't just a slogan, it's actually happening on the ground.
Precisely. The policy encourages the trade, and the trade reinforces the policy. It's a feedback loop. We now call it the Act East policy, which is an even more proactive version.
Okay, let's move from the abstract numbers to the concrete reality. How does all this stuff actually get in and out of India? We are talking about ports. The gateways.
The gateways, yes. The physical choke points of our economy.
And this brings us right back to my intro teaser, the coastline paradox. We have this huge, beautiful coastline, but the West Coast has more major ports than the East Coast. Why?
The text asks this exact why question explicitly, and the answer is twofold. One is historical and geographical, and the other is strategic.
Okay, break it down for us. Let's start with the geography.
Geographically, the West Coast is what we call a submerged coast. It has lots of natural creeks, inlets, and estuaries.
Estuaries. Define that for us in simple terms.
An estuary is where a river meets the sea, but the sea tides rush in deep into the river mouth. It creates deep water right up to the land. And deep water is exactly what you need for a good harbor. You can park a massive ship right next to the shore without it hitting the bottom.
Okay, so the West Coast is naturally gifted for ports, and the East Coast.
The East Coast is an emergent coast, which is full of deltas. You have the Mahanadi, the Godavari, the Krishna, the Kaveri, all these massive rivers dumping millions of tons of silt into the Bay of Bengal every year.
So it's shallow and muddy.
It's incredibly shallow. You have to constantly dredge, scoop out the mud just to create a deep enough channel for ships.
Yeah.
Nature basically made the West Coast a ready-made parking lot for ships.
Right.
And the East Coast a long, sandy beach.
That explains the geology. But there is a historical layer to this too, isn't there?
There is. Think about where our trade was going for the last 300 years. It was going to Europe, through the Suez Canal. It was going to the Middle East for oil.
Right, all to the rest of India.
Right. The West Coast is simply closer to the Suez Canal shipping routes. It's just more efficient. So ports naturally develop there to service that critical trade connection.
That makes perfect sense. Now, the text divides ports into major and minor. Is that just about size, like a big port and a small port?
No, it's about jurisdiction. Major ports are regulated by the central government under the Major Port Trusts Act. Minor ports are managed and regulated by the respective state governments.
And how many do we have of each?
At the time the text was written, there were 12 major ports and 185 minor ports. But here is the kicker. Those 12 major ports handle about 75% of the country's entire oceanic traffic.
Wow, so the big guys really, really dominate. Okay, let's take the listeners on a virtual tour. I want to visualize this map. Let's start on the west coast, way up north in Gujarat. We have Kandla. What is Kandla's story?
Kandla is a child of partition. This is a crucial historical detail. Before 1947, the main port for the entire northwest of India, Punjab, Rajasthan, Gujarat was Karachi.
Which went to Pakistan.
Exactly. So suddenly, our entire northwest was cut off from its primary port. The pressure on Mumbai became unbearable. We lost Karachi, so we had built Kandla immediately to relieve that pressure.
So it's post-partition port. And what does it handle?
It's designed for the heavy bulk stuff. Petroleum, fertilizers, food grains. It feeds the energy and agricultural needs of northwest India. It's a workhorse port.
Okay, moving down the coast, the big one, Mumbai.
Biggest. A magnificent natural harbor. It's the biggest port in the country in terms of traffic volume. But it was so old and so congested that they had to build a satellite port right next to it.
Jawaharlal Nehru Port, also known as Namasheva.
Yes, JNPT, or Namasheva. It was built specifically to be a modern container port, to take the container load off the old Mumbai docks. It's now the largest container port in India.
So it's like Mumbai is the old, crowded city, and Namasheva is the modern, planned logistics hub next door.
Yeah.
Okay, moving south, we get to Goa.
Marmagao. This one is interesting. It sits right at the entrance of the Zuari estuary, so it's a natural harbor. It was a fairly sleepy port until 1961.
What happened in 1961? Goa's liberation.
Exactly. After its integration with India, it was remodeled and developed to export iron ore, mainly to Japan.
Japan. Why Japan?
Yes. In the post-war boom, Japan's steel industry was hungry for raw materials. India had massive iron ore reserves in Goa and Karnataka. Marmagao became the exit point for that trade. The text also mentions the Konkan Railway later extended its hinterland, making it even more important.
Okay, further south, New Mangalore in Karnataka.
A similar story, really. It primarily exports iron ore from the Kudramukh mines in Karnataka. It also handles other regional products like coffee, spices, and cashew nuts.
And then we hit the bottom of the west coast, Kutch.
The Queen of the Arabian Sea, a beautiful natural harbor. Its biggest advantage is its location. It's right near the main Suez-Colombo international shipping route. It's a perfect pit stop for global shipping.
Okay, so we're rounding the tip of India at Kanyakumari and coming up the east coast. What's the first big one we hit?
Tuticorin in Tamil Nadu, and then Chennai. Now, Chennai is one of the oldest ports, but it has a big problem.
What's the problem? The shallow water you mentioned.
Exactly. It's an artificial harbor built way back in 1859, and it suffers from that shallow water problem typical of the East Coast. So the really big modern ships struggle to dock there.
So did they build a satellite port for Chennai too, just like they did for Mumbai?
They did. Innor, which is now called Kamarajar Port. It was developed specifically to relieve pressure on Chennai and handle bulk cargo like coal for the thermal power plants there.
Makes sense. Moving up the coast, we get to Visakhapatnam.
Vizag. This is my favorite description in the entire chapter. The text calls it a landlocked harbor.
A landlocked harbor? That sounds like a complete oxymoron. How can a harbor be landlocked?
Because it's a natural inlet, but it's protected from the open sea by a high promontory of land called Dolphin's Nose. It's connected to the sea by a channel that was cut through solid rock and sand. So the port itself is shielded from cyclones and the rough sea.
That is very cool. So it's man-made access to a natural safe haven. And further up.
Paradwip in Orissa, now Odisha. This one is known for being the deepest harbor on the coast. It's specially suited for very large vessels, the supertankers. And what does it export? Unsurprisingly, iron ore from the mineral-rich belt of Odisha and Jharkhand.
I'm sensing a theme with the East Coast ports and iron ore. And finally, we get to West Bengal, Kolkata.
Yes, the great riverine port. It's not on the sea at all. It's located on the Hooghly River, 128 kilometers inland from the Bay of Bengal.
That sounds incredibly difficult to maintain.
It is. The text mentions the constant problem of silt accumulation. The river keeps trying to fill up the channel with mud, so they have to constantly dredge it to keep it open for ships.
And does Kolkata have a satellite port to help with this?
It does, Haldia. It's located just downstream, closer to the sea. It was built to catch the bigger ships that can't or find it too difficult to make it all the way up the river to Kolkata.
And Kolkata's unique because its hinterland isn't just India, right? It serves our neighbors.
Right. It's the primary port for our landlocked neighbors, Nepal and Bhutan. All their sea trade comes and goes through Kolkata.
Now, speaking of neighbors and ports, there was a specific question in the prelims of 2017 about a port that isn't in India but is critically important for India. I'm talking about Chabahar.
Yes. Chabahar Port, located in Iran.
Why on earth does the UPSC ask about an Iranian port in a paper on the Indian economy and geography?
Because of strategy. Geopolitics. Remember how Kandla was built to bypass Karachi after partition? Chabahar is being developed by India to access Afghanistan and Central Asia by bypassing Pakistan.
It's the same geopolitical game, just played 70 years later on a bigger chessboard.
Exactly. Pakistan blocks our land route to the north to Afghanistan and beyond, so we're using the sea route to Iran to hop over them. The 2017 question explicitly asked about its importance, and the correct answer was precisely that, giving India access to Afghanistan without depending on Pakistan.
It connects perfectly to the international trade theme. Trade creates the need for infrastructure, and politics dictates where that infrastructure goes.
Spot on. You can't separate the economy from foreign policy.
Now, we kept using a word during that whole tour, hinterland. Can we define that properly for everyone?
Sure. A hinterland is simply the area served by a port. It's the region from where the goods come to be exported and the region where the imports are distributed once they land.
The text mentions something interesting about hinterlands, that they aren't fixed. They're not drawn with a permanent marker on a map.
Right, they can overlap. A factory in, say, Madhya Pradesh might send its goods to Mumbai port one day and to Kandla port the next, depending on railway traffic or port handling charges. But the text also uses a very evocative and frankly dark phrase to describe the hinterlands in the British era. It says the British used the ports as suction points.
Suction points. That sounds predatory.
It was meant to be. The British didn't develop ports to develop India. They used the ports to suck resources out of the hinterland: cotton from Maharashtra, timber from the forests, minerals from the mines, and ship them to factories in England. The entire railway network was built to facilitate this suction, connecting the resource-rich interiors to the ports.
And so after independence, the job was to reverse that flow, to use the ports to bring development into the hinterland.
Exactly. We tried to make the ports engines of development for their regions, not just exit doors for our raw materials.
Let's briefly touch on air transport. The text seems to view it as important, but, limited.
It is. It's fast, but it's very expensive. The text says it's essential for high-value or perishable goods. You don't ship coal or iron ore by airplane. You ship diamonds, high-end electronics, or fresh flowers and pharmaceuticals.
So low volume, high value, that's the niche for air cargo.
Precisely. It's a critical part of the system, but it's never going to replace the massive tonnage that moves on the ocean routes.
Now, all of this trade, the ports, the planes, the exports, the imports, it all falls under the giant umbrella of globalization. This is a buzzword we hear constantly. How does the NCERT text define it?
The text has a very simple, direct definition. It defines globalization as integrating the economy of the country with the world economy. It's fundamentally about removing barriers to trade and investment.
And this is a favorite topic for UPSC in the mains exam.
A huge topic. You can connect this simple definition directly to the 2014 mains question. It asked about the new economic policy, liberalization, privatization, globalization.
The famous LPG reforms of 1991 we mentioned at the start.
Right. The NCERT text sets the foundation by explaining what these terms mean: opening the economy to foreign direct investment, FDI, removing the license rod restrictions. The mains question then asks you to critique it, analyze its impact, and so on.
And there were prelims questions too, right? About the WTO, the World Trade Organization.
Yes. Prelims 2017 asked about the Trade Facilitation Agreement of the WTO. And Prelims 2015 asked about things like special drawing rights, SDRs, and foreign exchange reserves.
How does this chapter help with those seemingly complex topics?
Well, the chapter explains the context of foreign exchange. It explains why we need reserves to pay for all that imported oil and gold. It explains that we moved from a restricted, closed system to a more open one. The WTO questions are just testing your understanding of the modern application of that open system. If you understand the NCERT's explanation of liberalization, you understand why India would sign a trade facilitation agreement. The goal is the same: make trade easier.
It's all connected. The text gives you the grammar and the exam asks you to write the sentence.
That's a great way to put it.
So we've covered the history, the commodities, the ports, and the policies. Let's synthesize all this. What is the final so what here?
The so what is that international trade isn't just about money or numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about a nation's vulnerability and its opportunity.
Vulnerability because of the oil dependence.
Yes. Our massive trade deficit is a vulnerability. Our heavy dependence on energy imports is a major strategic vulnerability. A war in the Middle East can cause inflation in India.
And the opportunity side of the coin.
The opportunity is that sea change, the shift to manufacturing, the move toward becoming a global hub for certain goods and services. It's our path to creating jobs and wealth.
There is a projected mains question for 2025 that really struck me when I was looking through the notes. It asks, do you think globalization results in only an aggressive consumer culture?
That is a deep philosophical question. And if you only look at Instagram or walk through a mall, you might say, yes, it's just about brands and consumerism.
But if you look at the data we just spent the last hour discussing,
The data tells a completely different story. Look at our main imports: petroleum, fertilizers, capital goods, machinery. That's not consumer culture. That is the fuel for our industry, our agriculture, and our infrastructure.
so globalization is literally keeping the lights on and the farms running, not just bringing in the latest smartphones.
Exactly. It's about how a country connects its people and economy, which is the title of the book, to the rest of the world. The ports are the physical connection, the policies are the legal connection, and the commodities we trade are the material connection.
It really paints a picture of a complex, interconnected organism. India isn't an island, economically speaking, not anymore.
No. And the trend, the Look East policy becoming Act East, the development of new, modern ports like Ennore and Navasheva, and the strategic investment in a port like Chabahar, it all shows that India is trying to become a more active player, not just a passive recipient of global trends.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for the listener.
The text mentioned that India aims to double its share in international trade. That's an incredibly ambitious goal, going from 1% to 2%. When you look at the PYQs about make in India, which is implied by this whole manufacturing shift and strategic moves like Chabahar, you have to ask yourself, is India moving from being a passive trader to becoming a strategic global hub?
Are we just participants in a game designed by others, or are we now trying to write some of the rules and run a part of the show?
That's the big question for the next decade. And the answer will be written in the trade statistics.
And that is something for you, the listener, to mull over. It's not just about memorizing the port names for the exam, it's about understanding the grand strategy behind the map. Okay, that wraps up our deep dive into Chapter 11 and its countless UPSC connections. A quick reminder before we go, if you want the notes that connect all these dots, the NCERT summaries plus these exact PYQs we discussed, go to the public Telegram channel.
And for the really serious aspirants, you should join the private library for the premium content. That's where you get the model mains answers for tough questions, like the gold craze one, or the globalization and consumer culture one.
Subscribe to Simplified UPSC by PPP on YouTube, support on Patreon if you can, and keep learning. We'll see you in the next deep dive.
Goodbye and happy studying.